Money feels permanent when it works. It feels like gravity, always there, invisible, dependable. People build homes, careers, futures, and identities on it, and rarely ask what keeps it standing. But history tells a colder story. Money is not bedrock. It is trust, organized, enforced, repeated, and believed, stamped into metal, printed onto paper, or written into digits. And when trust vanishes, money doesn't argue. It doesn't negotiate. It evaporates. Every civilization believes its system is different, more advanced, more regulated, more protected by experts, laws, institutions, and safety nets. Each one believes collapse is something that happened to someone else. In another century, under weaker leadership, in a cruder world, yet financial collapse is not an exception. It is a pattern. Empires rise on confidence, and they decay when confidence breaks, not suddenly, not always with flames and crowds, often quietly, like rot inside a beam that still looks strong from the outside. At first, nothing seems wrong. Markets still open, coins still circulate, bank doors still swing on their hinges, people still swipe cards, sign contracts, and assume tomorrow will resemble today. But value begins to thin. Governments face pressures they cannot escape. Wars that must be funded, debts that must be rolled over, promises made in calmer years that no longer match reality. And when the cost of maintaining power grows larger than honest revenue can cover, leaders reach for the oldest shortcut in history. Dilution? A little less metal in the coin, a little more paper in circulation, a little more temporary relief that somehow becomes permanent. The change is subtle, almost polite. The coin looks the same. The note looks the same. The system insists nothing has changed. But money remembers every compromise, and trust keeps score. Look at Byzantium. For centuries, the gold solidus was a foundation stone of trade. Not because it was magical, because it was consistent. It didn't need speeches. Its purity was the message. A stable coin creates a stable marketplace. It reduces suspicion. It lowers friction. It allows strangers to trade without fear. That's what sound money really buys: cooperation. But governments are rarely content with stability. Stability limits what they can spend. And when spending becomes a requirement of power, temptation turns into policy. So the edges are shaved, purity is trimmed, a small compromise becomes a habit, and the habit becomes a system. The merchant notices first. He doesn't call it debasement. He just feels something off in the weight, in the color, in the sound when the coin hits wood. He raises prices, not to exploit, but to survive. Then the soldier notices. His pay buys less food, less oil, less security for his family. He demands more coins, not realizing that more coins are the sickness, not the cure. Then everyone notices, because the marketplace becomes a courtroom. Every transaction becomes an argument. Every price becomes a negotiation about reality itself. When trust collapses, the economy doesn't simply slow down. It changes shape. People stop saving. They stop planning. They stop accepting long-term promises. They begin to hoard what feels real: grain, tools, metal, land. And the more they do, the more the official system weakens. This is why real value flees to assets outside imperial reach. Land cannot be duplicated overnight. Gold cannot be printed. Skills cannot be confiscated from the mind as easily as money can be frozen in a bank. History repeats this lesson with brutal consistency. Consider the Black Death. When the population collapsed, money did not matter the way it once had. Scarcity shifted. Labor became precious. Wages rose, not because society became kinder, But because reality became sharper, crises rearrange bargaining power. They reveal what was always true but rarely acknowledged. Value is not what the system declares. Value is what people need. In the aftermath, those who had reserves, silver, goods, stored food, could buy what others were forced to sell. Not because they were villains, but because liquidity is leverage when the world is desperate. This is the dark mechanics of collapse. It is not only destruction, it is transfer. Renaissance. Florence learned a different version of the same lesson. Powerful banking houses appeared untouchable. Their names carried prestige. Their buildings looked like permanence carved into stone. Then they lent to kings, and kings defaulted. The banks fell anyway. Too big to fail is not a law of nature. It is a story people tell themselves when they fear the alternative. Institutions exist for profit, not for your survival. Their reputation is not your protection. Their size is not your shield. War accelerates every weakness already present in a system. It turns eventual into immediate. During the American Civil War, paper flooded both sides. Printing became the weapon that didn't require votes, the stealth tax that didn't need consent. The bills multiplied, and purchasing power collapsed. At first, people still accepted the notes. Then they demanded more notes. Then they demanded something else entirely. Hard assets held value. Food held value. Land held value. Gold held value. Paper became a cruel joke because everyone understood the punchline. The promise was no longer believable. And this pattern did not end with ancient coins or 19th century presses. Modern crises wear modern clothing, but the skeleton is the same. Look at Lebanon. A financial system can appear normal right up until the moment it stops paying. People woke up to frozen deposits, withdrawal limits, and a currency that collapsed by degrees until it felt like a cliff. They learned a fact that many prefer not to face. Money in a bank is not a treasure chest. It is a loan to an institution, and in a crisis, that institution can choose not to repay you. The screen can still show a balance. That number can still look comforting. But access is part of wealth. If you cannot reach it, it is not functioning as money. Collapse often arrives as restriction, not as announcement. A door that does not open, a transfer that does not clear, a limit that was not there yesterday. And when access disappears, trust follows it into the dark. Debt becomes lethal when it is owed in someone else's currency. A foreign currency loan can feel smart in stable times, lower rates, easier approval. But when the local system fails, the obligation does not shrink with you. It grows. And it grows in the exact moment your income becomes weaker. That is why borrowing in someone else's money can become a death trap. Not dramatic, mechanical. Across continents and centuries, the cycle appears again and again. Currency pressure, policy shortcuts, trust erosion.
Then the slow migration toward anything that feels real. But there is always a second truth hidden inside the disaster. Some people endure, not because they predicted every detail, not because they timed the market, but because they prepared for fragility instead of worshiping stability. The survivors are rarely the ones who trusted the system most. They are the ones who understood it as a tool, useful but not sacred. They hold real assets, land, property, metal, hard goods, inventories that can be exchanged when symbols fail. They maintain liquidity outside the system, not as paranoia, as redundancy. They develop productive skills because production never loses meaning. A baker remains wealthy when he can feed people. A builder remains valuable when he can create shelter. A craftsman remains relevant when he can repair what breaks. A farmer remains powerful when he can grow what others cannot buy. This is the form of wealth that doesn't depend on permission. Collapse punishes passivity. It rewards positioning. Every crisis creates bargains, but only for those who can act. And action requires resources, money you can access, goods you can trade, skills you can use. This is why collapse feels unfair, because it is not a moral event. It is a mechanical event. A transfer from the many who assumed stability to the few who planned for fragility. Systems fail slowly, then suddenly. Institutions empty before they fall. Belief leaves before the headlines change. By the time panic reaches the street, the outcome is often already decided, because the real collapse happened earlier, inside the invisible plumbing of trust. Money fails first, then contracts fail, then institutions fail, then society changes its behavior. But something always survives. Knowledge survives. Skills survive, land survives, metal survives, and memory survives if people are willing to learn. History does not repeat, but it rhymes with uncomfortable precision. The names change, the flags change, the technology changes, but the pattern remains. When money becomes a tool of extraction instead of a tool of exchange, trust collapses, and society pays the bill. The lesson is not to live in fear. The lesson is to see clearly. Money is not the foundation of civilization. Trust is. And trust, once broken, cannot be printed back into existence. So what survives when money fails? What survives is what was real all along. Tangible assets, productive skill, adaptable communities, and a mind trained by history. Because the world does not reward the most trusting. It rewards the most prepared.